afternoon, everybody. There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's great to see so many people here. I'm so excited about today's event and so delighted that you're here. For those who may not know me, I'm Andrew Guzman. I'm a Dean of the USC Gould School of Law. I'm the current occupant of the seat. Thank you for joining us for this really terrific opportunity. You're in for a real treat. For the first time ever, as far as we know, let's just say it's the first time ever anywhere, we have six law deans from the law school together for a conversation about the school, its history, its impact, its legacy. On this stage are 50 years of unbroken leadership at the law school, so it's a really terrific opportunity. One of the things I say about the law school is that we're redefining the standard of legal education, scholarship, and practice. And our ability to do that is a reflection in significant part of the incredible leadership from all of the people on this stage over the years. We're going to keep the biographies of the deans spoken orally very, very short. But if you'd like to know more about them, please visit our website, gould120.usc.edu, to read their bios. We resisted the paper option to save the trees. Thank you. This event is also special because it kicks off a celebratory year for us, our 120th anniversary as a law school. So that's another great moment for us. And one last announcement, I suppose, is that I want to welcome everyone who's watching on the online webcast, which is also being provided. To kick things off, though, I have the great opportunity to introduce a very special guest, the 12th president of the University of Southern California, Dr. Carol L. Folt. Dr. Folt is a highly experienced leader, internationally recognized life scientist, and award-winning teacher. Throughout her career, Dr. Folt has earned a reputation for placing students at the center, advancing academic excellence and innovation, setting ambitious goals, prioritizing shared governance, and focusing on the future. Prior to coming to USC, Dr. Folt led the She also had leadership roles at Dartmouth College, including interim president, provost, dean of faculty, and professor of biological sciences. During her recent inauguration, Dr. Folt said, "We are at our best when we're channeling our imagination toward finding solutions that are innovative, sustainable, and just." It seems to me that that vision aligns not only with the work we do at Gould, but also the legacy we leave through our academic innovation, our clinical impact, and our commitment to advancing justice. We're so delighted that Dr. Folt is here with us today. Please welcome Dr. Carol Folt.
Hello, everyone. Hi, everybody. Hi. Now, it is really wonderful to be here, and I'm so excited to be meeting all of you and looking forward to hearing our panelists. I wanted to do a couple thank yous. I think we have quite a few members of the Gould Board of Counselors. Could all of you raise your hands? Thank you for being here. How about faculty and staff? Wonderful, thank you. How about our students? That's great. I think I could go on because I know there are a lot of other people who are also here or tuning in, but I want to say thank you to everyone, and especially to the people that organized this, the staff who brought it together and are getting this entire 120 years of excellence celebration launched for this year. One thing that's really great for a new president is when you get to go places and learn everything about the school that you're visiting, and not only do I get to hear it from Andrew, I now truly get to hear it from the deans who have been running this school for such a long time, and I think that's exciting. And with me today is Chip Zukowski. Chip, you might stand, our new provost in his second week. So we're both saying how fortunate it is that we could be here and have a chance to listen to this conversation. It is true for me that as I think about what's so important at the institution, that I often look back through history. And I talked about it at the inauguration, that the way the university started is a lot of what makes us so strong today. These principles about being there to leverage the diversity of the city, that could certainly be said for the law school. To give service back to the community, so important in what's done here. To strive for excellence in everything that we do, and to innovate and to be entrepreneurial. I think as the university has developed, certainly the law school has been a very important part of that, developing in all those ways for the school. The dedication and the passion to these fundamental principles have really produced results, and so I'm just so grateful for all that you've achieved and looking forward to working together with people. And of course, it has brought this institution to be one of the top 20 law schools in America, and that's something really worth talking about. You know, I'm not going to give a big overview, but I do want to touch a few high points, maybe just because they're so much fun for me to say them, about a school that I'm very proud of being associated with. But I think it has a very strong history in clinical education. And that is something that's so important. It founded the first modern legal aid program in 1929. And that goes together with all the service and the justice that I hear from our students and our faculty. It later became the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. So that's really being a part of the city, and that pioneer work is continuing. On a local level, we have the Post-Conviction Justice Project, which has been known because it has co-sponsored or wrote nearly every juvenile justice bill in California since 2012. As someone who's viewing this for the first time, I tell you, these are really things to remark and be proud of, and they have meaning for so many people in the state and beyond. The Small Business Clinic, which has counseled more than 200 entrepreneurs in just the last year alone, that formed and organized nearly more than 100 businesses, a majority, and I love this statistic, of these businesses owned by women or underrepresented individuals. And the Mediation Clinic, which has mediated more than 600 cases in just the last year alone. So if you're looking for examples where what we do is truly reaching out and having impact in the community, you don't have to look any further than the examples I just gave you. It's also very effective on a global level. International Human Rights Clinic, that has represented more than 100 refugees, asylum seekers, forced laborers, or survivors of domestic or human trafficking in just the last 3 years. The Immigration Clinic, which has counseled more than 30 LGBTQ asylum seekers at the southern border. Meaningful work, it makes a real difference, and I know there's a pledge to continue to do this and build on these great advances. I talked in the inauguration about this is the decade of breaking down every wall and doing the collaboration at warp speed. And I think this, again, I turn to the law school and I think we've got a great start here because people are working so well with other entities, and I think we're going to hear from the past deans. This has to be something they've been working on for a long time. But it was among the first law schools to offer interdisciplinary legal education, and that has had a tremendous impact. I think you could look at the need to break down silos, but also to hear different voices. The diversity and inclusion that I talk about, but that has been a part of the university from its start, is also so clearly a part of the mission of the law school. And I think we start by acknowledging that the strength that we have is built on the diversity of who we are. We have a way to go, but I know that we're going to keep pushing that here too. And we can celebrate that women and underrepresented individuals and international students were among Gould's earliest graduates. And that certainly would not be true for many, if not most, of the leading law schools in America. Today, we're seeing Judge Dorothy W. Nelson, who's one of our speakers today, and she served as dean from 1968 to 1980, later appointed a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, and of course is a pioneer in leading a top law school. Alumnus Y.C. Hong, the first Chinese American to pass the California State Bar exam, later became the nation's foremost Chinese civil rights attorney. So again, those examples go on and on, that diversity, inclusion, wellness are top priorities for the university and for Gould. Under Dean Guzman, Gould has institutionalized the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. And I think thanks to this initiative, people have been working very hard to increase African American student enrollment, and it's been going up for 3 straight years. So again, we want to applaud that, but continue that purposeful intention as we build the school. It's also been strong in supporting first-generation students, has a first-gen professional program, and this is one of the very first to administratively support programs like this nationwide. So I really want to thank Dean Guzman, Gould's first Latino dean, for leading a university-wide Latino growth initiative. So as we look forward and we listen to the history, what got us here, it's going to build where we want to go. And I'm going to be so excited to be a part of all those efforts with the university and with the school and your leadership. Bringing back 6 deans is very impressive. We're so grateful to have our mediator and all of you here to listen and learn. And so I will turn it over to the main event now by saying how proud I am to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Folt. It's an honor to be back with the Trojan family to moderate a discussion with this amazing group of leaders. Thanks to all of you for joining us online or here today to celebrate the 120th year of USC law. We have so much of which we can be proud, and we're grateful to these innovative leaders, including the students and alumni who worked with them. They pushed the law school to national prominence based on a unique set of core values. We're particularly grateful to these deans today who challenged us to improve constantly and who safeguarded our values through changing times. So you know that the biographies are online, but permit me to just briefly introduce the panelists, particularly for our students today. To my left is the Honorable Dorothy Wright Nelson, a senior judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. She served as interim dean beginning in 1967 and was dean until she went on the federal bench in 1980. Next to her is Scott Bice, the Robert C. and Annette T. Packard Professor of Law at USC Gould. He was dean for 2 decades, from 1980 to 2000, my dean. Then Matt Spitzer served as dean for 6 years. He is now the Howard and Elizabeth Chapman Professor and Director of the Center on Law, Business, and Economics at Northwestern University. In 2006, Ed McCaffery stepped up to serve as interim dean for a year. He is the Robert C. Packard Trustee Chair in Law and Professor of Law, Economics, and Political Science at USC. From 2007 to 2015, Robert Rasmussen served as dean, and he is now the J. Thomas McCarthy Trustee Chair in Law and Political Science at USC. And you all know our current dean, Andrew Guzman, who holds the Carl Mason Franklin Chair in Law and is a professor of law and political science at USC. So we'll hope to spend about an hour in conversation with the deans, and if there's time, you may see some index cards pass through to ask questions at the end. Please include your name and your affiliation. Are you a student? Are you an alumnus? Are you a faculty or staff member? All right, so let's get started. We're very proud that USC Law is among the most diverse and inclusive law schools in the nation today. Deans, we'd like to hear why diversity has been such a priority for us and how you sought to advance those efforts during your deanship. We'll start with Judge Nelson, herself a trailblazer for women in legal education, as one of 2 women in her law school class, one of the first 14 tenure stream female faculty members nationwide, and one of the first female deans at an ABA law school. Indeed, for 5 years of her remarkable tenure, she was the only female dean at an ABA accredited law school. So Judge Nelson, why did you emphasize diversity for our student body, and what did you do to try to make us more inclusive?
Thank you so much. I have to admit, this young lady was a student of mine, and I continue to be very proud that some of the rest of the deans were students of mine. When I came to the school, I was, and the faculty knew this, I was a member of the Baha'i faith. And two of the social principles of that faith are the oneness of mankind and the equality of women and men. So we set out to entice women to come to the USC Law School. When I became dean, there were 3% of the students who were women. They were 35% when I left. They're over 50%. The other was diversity of race. When the Watts riots came, I was one of the commissioners for Mayor Bradley, and he called me up and said, get your faculty out on the streets because they understand the importance of diversity. Well, the faculty were very instrumental in keeping everyone at USC in a positive mood rather than destroying things, trying to see what we can do. So we decided to go out and recruit African American law school students first. You know, we had to go to beauty parlors because most African American women go to the beauty parlor at least once a week. They who had graduate children didn't want them to go to graduate school. They wanted them to go earn a living so the rest of the children could go to school. Well, we were quite successful in getting them all scholarships, and we took our first class of 20 African American students. Well, we were a little stupid because we didn't know how to treat them. We thought if we gave them a scholarship and offered them a tutor, they would be very happy. Well, they felt they were treated like second-class citizens, and out of that 20, 7 of them failed to make the grade. Thurgood Marshall, a particular friend of mine, called me and said, Dean, don't have a black degree and a white degree. You get those 7 into other law schools. Well, because I believed as a dean that LA should be a legal center and that students at UCLA, where I went, and Loyola, and the faculty joined together to create our Western Center on Law and Poverty. Well, first of all, we did get those 7 students into other law schools with full scholarships, and 4 of them ended up graduating. But the other thing that was important was when we created the Western Center on Law and Poverty, I had nothing to do with this, but it sued Police Chief Davis. Police Chief Davis didn't know I had nothing to do with that decision. It was up to the boards of those 3, and he went on channels 4, 7, and 11 and said, D. Nelson is a communist. Well, 2 of our alums, Judge Ellickson, Matt Bird, said, Dorothy, you've got to do something about this. So we arranged a lunch. No, it actually was a cocktail hour. I had asked for a lunch, but with Chief Davis from 7 to 8, my husband, the other judge in the family, circled the restaurant, a very exclusive restaurant downtown. Well, when I began to speak to the chief, and I was drinking my Shirley Temple, and he was having martinis with Judge Ellickson, and I explained to him, wasn't it better to have the lawsuit brought than taking to the streets? He said, you didn't make the decision? I said, no. He said, well, let's have another drink. So I had another Shirley Temple. It was 7 to 8, 8 to 9. Then I said, Chief Davis, I don't want to impose on your time. He said, oh, let's have another round. Well, I finally got out at 10 o'clock. Unfortunately, the owner of the restaurant was the father of one of our students. So I get to school the next day. There is a newspaper saying, Dean caves in to police chief. The students thought I was a fascist, and so the trustees were worried that I was a communist. I was just trying to do my job. It took a couple of years to work through that, but our faculty, I want to say, the fact that USC had no property damage, absolutely nothing happened on campus because our faculty, many of them stayed up all night long talking to the students. Dr. Topping was president, and I said, the students want to talk to you, Dr. Topping. Should I? I said, of course you should. So we arranged for the students to send in delegates. At any rate, I give credit to our faculty and am delighted to see many diverse students in this room today.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I appreciate you addressing some of the challenges. It wasn't always easy, and we might forget those days on campus. Right. Dean Bice, could you speak to how the faculty and other constituencies helped in the efforts over time to diversify the faculty and staff and students at USC Law?
The dean can only do so much. It all depends on the faculty's support for both the diversity and inclusivity, not only in the student body, but on the faculty itself. And we have been blessed over the years to have a deep dedication in our faculty to these efforts. It takes a lot of time, a lot of hard work, a lot of recruitment of students, searching for faculty. And our progress, our success, it really goes to the faculty and to their willingness and to their dedication to moving in this direction.
Thank you. Dean Spitzer, can you speak about the academic support program and any other initiatives that the school has really launched to help all students succeed?
Sure. So when I became dean, we had an unfortunately low bar passage rate here in California. It was down in the 70-some% range, while our direct competitors, being Stanford, Berkeley, UCLA, were up in the very high 80s, pushing 90. And you just don't want a 15% gap. On top of that, it's not good for the students. They spend 3 years here working hard, accumulating debt, and then they really need to pass the bar in order to have a decent life and pay off their debts and support themselves and their family. So I took a look at sort of the data in terms of what was happening, and it was pretty clear that some of our students needed sort of an academic support program, which would help with the very basics of learning law and learning how to write a successful law exam. Because, you know, we on the faculty care a lot more about our students than the bar examiners do. They don't care at all. You know, they're happy to fail anyone they possibly can. They're basically in charge of protecting the cartel. And so with Dean Saltzman's help and Tom Griffith's help, once again, as Dean Bice just said, the dean doesn't do a lot of the work. You have to persuade the faculty and staff to get on board and in particular make it seem as if your ideas were really their ideas. And sometimes they are. And so we put it in. I learned that from my father, who was a longtime administrator here at USC, he was the dean of the College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, and he was chair of the physics department, and he was acting provost and so forth. And so, I sort of asked him, so how do you be a leader? And he said, first you should listen to people. Academic support seemed to be bubbling up. And then once you decide that their ideas are right, make sure they know that they're their ideas that they're implementing. And so I did that, and we made it open for everyone, and a lot of people took advantage, and our bar passage rate went from 74 to, I don't know what it is today, but it hit 88, 89 at one point, which I consider a success.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, Your Honor.
Yeah. We gave all our minorities, students a tutor, but that made them feel insured. So the next year, we said this for anybody who wants a tutor. 68% asked for a tutor, and this academic program that Matt talks about was a very important addition to the school.
Thank you. Dean McCaffery, what one event during your tenure best exemplified USC's commitment to diversity and inclusion?
Wow, that's a tough one, because I think every day at USC is a commitment to diversity and inclusion. And as dean, I'm not even sure we don't like to talk about it necessarily as diversity. I think the commitment is to excellence, and I think excellence has many faces. And diversity isn't a question of, accommodating some special thing and giving somebody a preference. Diversity is an acceptance that we live in a diverse world. And I'll give two. I was only an interim dean, so I don't have to follow all the rules. So I'm going to give two stories quickly, because somebody's going to tell me I was only the interim dean, and the rule is they cut the mic off. But let me tell two stories, because the first story is the first thing I did as dean. And I know there are a lot of alumni here, and I know every single alumni of USC Law School just loves Dorothy Nelson, that we are a footnote to Dorothy Nelson. So the alumni know that. I'm not sure the students know that. This event actually started, it's a celebration of our 120th year, which is exciting. It's also like Dorothy Nelson's 90th plus birthday. It started with a 90th birthday thing, which is just amazing. So the first thing, in terms of actually answering the question, my first experience with diversity and inclusion was lunch with Dorothy Nelson. And as you're going to hear today, as you can maybe imagine, it's hard to imagine if you haven't been a dean, if you haven't been a university administrator, what a difficult job it is. And it's kind of dominated a lot of times by money. You need money, you have to get money, you want money to give scholarships and to hire faculty. So a lot of times you can get lost in the weeds. So I was an accidental dean, just appointed on an interim basis, and I thought I got to learn how to do this thing. So I had lunch with Dorothy, and I thought Dorothy would teach me how to be a dean, teach me how to get money. And we spent an hour and a half talking about the Baha'i faith. And the Baha'i faith is almost, in this day and age, it's almost an anti-religion religion. It's the opposite of partisanship and tribalism. It's a religion that explicitly accepts all religions, accepts all people as equal. And after an hour and a half of talking to Dorothy, I was so inspired that a deanship could be about love, that academics could be about love, that we could love what we do, that we could try to bring love into the world. The money would follow. The money did follow because of the love of the very generous alumni and many other forces. But that lunch with Dorothy really set the tone of my deanship, and I'll always remember it. And then a second story, because I won't follow the rules, and by doing this I won't get asked another question. But the event about diversity and inclusion. So my year, first of all, we were gifted to have a wonderful football team with Pete Carroll, and we were winning national championships and so forth. And on my faculty, on our faculty, we had a very distinguished, we still do, very charismatic people. So Jodi Armour, the provost had a Vision and Voices program, which I think we still have, bringing diverse voices to the campus. So diversity is not just about skin color, it's not just about creed, it's about your voice, it's about your soul, it's about your discipline. that we can be open-minded and diverse in all these ways. So Jodi, Armour, and Ron Garrett, who's a classic, two classic really USC people. Ron Garrett, who had started here, came on the faculty before he got his JD because of the kind of innovative leadership that my predecessors, I'm just delighting in standing on the shoulders of giants. So Ron Garrett and Jodi Armour, charismatic young African-American scholar. Some of you have maybe seen him on TV. You have him in the classroom. He's a dynamic speaker, and he's also a very thoughtful thinker. So they put together a program called Race, Rap, and Redemption, in which they were going to present to the USC community under the provost's support over at Bovard a celebration of rap music as art, rap music as political statement, rap music as social justice. So we were over at Bovard, and I played a role in sort of setting this up. They kept running over budget, and I would help them out here and there. So the event starts. I think there's an 11 o'clock curfew over there at Bovard. We blow through the curfew, and we're there until midnight. And at midnight came this moment that I had planned in advance. Ice Cube was there. And I was going to give a certificate to Ice Cube. And I worked through USC. What kind of certificate could I give to Ice Cube, the rapper? So right about midnight, I got up and I thanked everybody. And I presented the certificate to Ice Cube as a scholar, as an advocate of political justice, as a member of the USC community, as a member of the Los Angeles community. And he was so touched by that. The place went crazy. We kind of ended the event. And afterwards, I got a tap on my shoulder that Ice Cube wanted to go back and take a picture with me. Now, as you can see, I'm not terribly photogenic, and these were the days before Instagram and selfies, but I thought, that's kind of cool. I'll take a photo with Ice Cube. And I went back to take the photo with Ice Cube, and it wasn't just Ice Cube, but Ice Cube brought his dad, this old Los Angelino, African-American, and his dad and Ice Cube and I all kind of hugged around this USC certificate, and we took a picture. And if you look at that picture, you can see the dad tearing up, because we had reached out to include a member of our own community who had much to give to us, and we had just noticed. So that's life at USC. That's life wonderful. Under Dorothy Nelson School.
Thank you, Dean. Dean Rasmussen, we've heard about faith, love. Will you talk a little bit about the personal things that drove you to really put an emphasis on equity and inclusion?
You know, I think first of all, for all the students here, you don't understand what a privilege is to walk into USC classroom every day and see you guys. I'm fortunate to have taught at 3 other top 20 schools. None of them can compare to the great community you see when you walk into our classroom every day. One thing that we haven't taught on yet, that we've really increased, I'd say in the last 20 years, is our increasing international outreach and presence in terms of we are now a global community. And this is not me, this is a series of deans who kept growing our programs in order to make sure that we reflect not only our community in Los Angeles, not only our community in the United States, but really the worldwide community. That, you know, today you come to USC Gould to meet not only the people who are going to lead Los Angeles, but people who are going to lead the world. And I think to see the learning that goes on in the building, that's what got me out of bed every day. To see the students talking with each other, learning from different cultures, from different backgrounds. That's what makes this, I think, a very special place, and why I'm so proud to sit here with my colleagues.
Thank you. Dean Guzman, if you don't mind, we're going to go on to the next topic, but we'll get to you along the way.
Who's me?
Better to be an ex-dean than to be a current dean.
So, in addition
I'll be there someday.
to building a more inclusive culture at the law school, these deans put efforts into clinical legal education. And this effort was shaped by several forces. They were concerned about giving law students practical training to be excellent lawyers, but there was also this desire to serve our neighbors, particularly those without access to the justice system. They also wanted to produce some cutting-edge research on law reform and improving the justice system. So Judge Nelson, will you speak to some of the early challenges the school faced in trying to emphasize clinical opportunities and how you worked to overcome those obstacles?
Well, clinical education was the practical application of law and to help underprivileged people get access to justice. I nearly lost my deanship over this because I had on the faculty several outstanding clinicians. And when the Harvard law dean came and hired away Gary Bello, the finest clinical professor in the United States, from us, doubled his salary, gave him all the support he needed, well, some of the faculty who were worried that we were going to turn into a trade school sort of got rid of their concerns. Because we had had such success at SC with the small clinical work we had, the Council on Legal Education for Professional Responsibility put me on its board. And we gave away $5 million a year. Well, we gave $1 million to Stanford, $1 million to Yale, $1 million to NYU, and so forth. And all of a sudden, our faculty began to say, well, maybe it's not so bad. One of the faculty whom I really enjoyed switched to Stanford before it got its grant. When it got its grant, he switched to Yale, and then it got its grants. I had to do research a year ago for an ADR conference, Alternative Dispute Resolution, and who was a keynoter with that faculty member? Well, I'll tell you who he was. Robert Ellickson, who was singing the praises of mediation for Oregonian farmers, that it was faster, quicker, less expensive, and more satisfactory than going to court. Trials are important for some cases, but for most they're too expensive, too ineffective, too destructive for a really civilized society. And I called up Bob, who was still at Yale. He said, yeah, I forgot to tell you. I was going to send you a copy of this talk. I thought you might get a kick out of it. Well, I said, I got more than a kick out of it because you had been converted, at any rate.
Wonderful. And those early clinics, it was the Western Center on Law and Poverty, it was the mediation program. There were a number of things, and they had both scholarly and practical aspects. So it was really, I think, also a burgeoning of the USC Law Center concept, and we'll come back to that. Dean Bice, we know clinical legal education is expensive, in part because of the small student-faculty ratio. So deans are constantly out there raising funds to support, whether it's clinical legal education, scholarships, or opportunities for students. Can you speak to some of the challenges and joys of fundraising? He was good at it.
So everybody on the stage here gets the job of dean and has never been involved in fundraising, doesn't never asked anybody for any money or anything like that. And so all of a sudden it becomes 30, 40, 50% of your responsibility. I was really blessed that I had a mentor in the central administration, a fellow by the name of Carl Franklin, who had been on the law faculty and had then gone to the general counsel's position and was a fundraiser himself. He really knew how to raise money from elderly people without heirs. That was his target group. And so my first day of raising money, I went out and met a foundation, a little small family foundation thing and so forth. And I had my pitch and so forth and so on. And by God, they said yes. And I said, well, this is fun, right? You get a yes answer. It's good. Later, I found out, of course, that Carl had called up the foundation person ahead of time and said, now, this guy's never done this before, and let's give him a little good head start, right? So it was a setup in the right direction. And from then on, that early confidence really, really helps you then to go out and establish relationships with people. Major fundraising is about establishing relationships and having them believe in you and in your institution and what it's about and so forth. And Carl had one other thing he told me, which I found to be very true, especially in large gifts. When you get somebody to make a commitment to the law school, whether it's for clinical education or minority enrollment or whatever, and they do it, they feel really good. And Carl said, you know, you're out there, yeah, you're raising money, but you're doing a really great thing for the donor. You're making the donor feel like they have really accomplished something. And that was my experience. One quick example, we had been in long discussions with a family to make a gift for a chair in real estate. And dinners, lunches, so forth. So we were invited to their house for dinner and sat down, and Herb Yoder says, look under your plate. And I looked under my plate, and there was a check for $1 million. We finally got the deal done, right? I called him the next morning, and I said, you know, thank you so much. This is great. He said, no. I thank you. I went out on the deck last night after having made this gift, and I thought, boy, I feel wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for making this possible for me. That's a lot of fun, and fundraising at its best. One final thing about it. Most philanthropic people are nice people. Most philanthropic people you're happy to be around because they've got a good spirit of giving and sharing their wealth.
Thanks to all of you for the hours you put into the fundraising. It is endless, and it's really sometimes a sacrifice of your own family, scholarship time, teaching time, but it pays off so much for our community. So thank you. Dean Rasmussen, is there anything, I'm sorry, Dean Guzman, is there anything you'd like to add? We got to give him a chance.
Sure. They all look alike.
Twins.
Anything you'd like to add on clinical legal education or any of the other pressing priorities now?
I want to comment on the original question that Dorothy answered about diversity, because our current 1L class is 57% female. And it turns out it's possible to essentially achieve victory in these struggles, even though it takes a long time and it's a lot of work. And in many other ways, you know, we're a work in progress. But our admissions process no longer frets about the male-female dynamic in the class because that issue has been addressed.
Maybe we need some thumb on the scale for guys that can't compete.
You know. And on the last point on diversity, on fundraising, I'm sorry, conscious of the fact that in the room are people who have asks in front of them, I want to speak carefully. And conscious of the fact that there are faculty in the room to whom I try to point out how miserable fundraising is because they don't get to see me doing it. But I want to endorse what Scott said, which is the folks who are interested in engaging us philanthropically are wonderful people, and they're doing it for a reason. They're doing it because they have a connection to the institution, because something in their education, in their career, speaks to the fact that this law school, at a moment in which they were being trained and formed, was an inflection point for them. And one of the most one of the things someone said to me early in my job that speaks to this most clearly, this was an alum who was not practicing law and hadn't practiced law in many years. And he said to me, I use my law degree every day. And that was when I understood what it means for a senior, whether attorney or business person or professional in whatever walk of life, to be continuing to benefit from the legal education we provide. And when I talk to folks who are interested in giving back to the law school, my sense, consistent with what Scott said, is they like the idea of being able to contribute to building something lasting and paying it forward. My last point is, and it's true of our students today, that when our students understand that they are benefiting from the generosity of those who've gone before them. And those who've gone before them, the folks I'm talking to as alums, they understand the same message. They understand that what they got from the people ahead of them was a loan and not a gift, and they have to repay it to the people behind them. And that's something that we do at this law school, and frankly at this university, better than any other institution of higher education that I'm aware of.
The third area of emphasis where USC law has really excelled is its interdisciplinary emphasis. So that's why we call it the Law Center. So Judge Nelson, will you explain that concept briefly?
When I became dean, I was looking through some old papers and found that Mr. Gould had given us a large sum of money so that our school would be named after him. And it was no longer the Gould School, and I changed it. A relative of his came down and said, I really like what you're doing, the interdisciplinary, the international, but here we are in Los Angeles, the legal center really of the world. And our first outreach was the Western Center on Law and Poverty. Then deans meet together, and I made friends with the dean of the School of Gerontology, and we said we need a center for the aging. And we adopted a law and gerontology program and so forth, a Chicano center, an Asian center, et cetera, because the law affects everyone and everybody. And it led to increased scholarship in the field. And I know that when we established our Western Justice Center, we had a seminar on mediation and arbitration in Shanghai. And some of the people in this room went to that. And China has been mediating for 5,000 years, but their mediation has turned out to the neighborhood leader becomes the mediator. When the people come in, they the head mediator says, let me tell you what you ought to do. So I went to China 8 times with many former students, with many judges, and all of a sudden, there is so much in common that we have in trying to give access to justice that I was very proud of the law school. Let's call ourselves the Law Center. That was not without some discussion, I might add. Well, as true with every faculty issue, but I think it's proven itself since that time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dean Bice, how did this interdisciplinary focus change the type of faculty members we hired?
We had a big change in the faculty around 1968, 66. A number of senior faculty retired, and they were traditional law professors. They taught the law, the black letter, not a lot about the social values, historical, philosophical issues that lie behind those black letter rules. The school didn't have a lot of money at the time, and so they replaced the senior faculty as they were retiring with some young teachers who had just graduated from the Yale Law School. And the Yale Law School took a very different approach to legal education. They really spent a lot of time looking at teaching about, discussing the underlying values, history, impact of those legal rules. And that was the beginning of the interdisciplinary approach at USC. Dorothy knows there was some of a fight. Some of the senior faculty thought, this is not what we do in law school. If you want to teach that, go to the sociology department. We're not about that. And there was a fight, and in the end, partly through convincing and partly through attrition, because they retired, it became the ethic of the USC Law School. And so now fully interdisciplinary teaching is the norm. The faculty has changed in a way because as that becomes important, you want people who are well versed in the other disciplines. So now in our law faculty, you will find a number of people who have PhDs as well as their law degrees in those fields that are important to understanding the social, philosophical, historical impact of the legal rules. One final comment. That focus is not so much on the day-to-day practice of what lawyers do. It's about the philosophic underpinning of what the rules are and where they come from. It's important. It's given really importance to the clinical faculty because the clinical faculty are the ones who translate that understanding of the philosophy and history of law into the actual things that lawyers do. And over the years, the clinical faculty has been integrated into the tenure track or the philosophical faculty in a way that I think is pretty unique in American legal education, is that we're all full partners in the enterprise and have great respect for the different role that the philosophical faculty and the clinical faculty bring to the ultimate graduate of the school.
Thank you. Dean Spitzer, by about 2000, if we fast forward, other top law schools were catching up with our interdisciplinary approach. So what did you do to try to keep us at the cutting edge?
The first thing, of course, is we had a lot of people on the faculty who could actually read the work that the interdisciplinary faculty candidates were doing, and we did. We read the work. We not only sifted, but then it was important in order to persuade top people with PhDs in other subjects to, beat them up a little bit in the interview and show them that not only did we understand what they had done, we understand what they had failed to do and how much better their work could be if they came to USC than, for example, many of our competitor schools where they were still sort of waving their hands and trying to lure folks to come to the school. And that was how we recruited many folks. We also tried to diversify along hiring some people who had PhDs in other fields but didn't yet have law degrees. And so we brought a philosopher named Barbara Herman and so forth. We brought a number of people onto the faculty, had them team teach, and probably emphasized field less than most schools, just trying to hire the very best person, okay. So we don't actually need someone who's doing law and this field, but they're really good at it, so let's just hire them. And this is in contrast to the hiring philosophy in most of our other departments at a university, where they tend to regard their faculty more like an orchestra. We need a bassoon player. You can't hire a violinist because they can't play the bassoon parts. And so they put constraints on the process, which produces fewer degrees of freedom, which produces lower general quality. Had a fight with a bunch of historians about this at one point when I was dean. And I'm going to invoke the Ed McCaffery rule because I'm not here. I'm going to tell one other story about fundraising, which explains a bit about the goodwill and nature of those who are generous with the school. I was going to visit a guy named Jim Rogers in Las Vegas. Jim, at that point, was, it's 15 years ago. Let's just say he was worth between $500 million and $1 billion at that point. And so I was in his office. I'd gone to Las Vegas several times because when you have an alum who is that successful, you should do that as dean. And I went, I sat down, I started sort of a slow sort of, we want to involve you as a contributor. So Jim says, want some money? I said, yes, sir. He said, how about 10 million? I said, so I had this thought. So at that point, if you were pitching for more than 5 million, that was supposed to run through the president's office and the chief development officer. And I thought, I'm not pitching. right? He just offered me $10 million for the school. So I said, yes. What went through my mind, of course, is having known Scott, the right thing to do was to say, actually, we need 25. But that's a pitch.
That was my move.
Right?
Yeah.
And that probably would have gotten me fired. I don't know, unless that he said yes, in which case they would never have fired me. So I said, yes, sir. I hadn't brought a pledge form with me. So I said, can I borrow a yellow pen? And so together we wrote out a pledge form with $10 million, payable either during life or upon death, which is the standard pledge form. Those of you who are alumni, you should get to know these things when you fill out your own pledge form. And so we just made up a pledge form. He signed it. I brought it back, and boy, did the chief development officer want to know what the heck this was. But, and so that's my development story. And I've run out of time. I got the message here, so.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Dean Rasmussen, we know being a dean is not an easy job. A university president once told me that a dean has to be both celebrant, that is bringing the community together, and confessor, holding the secrets and deeply personal issues close at times. Can you share one of those challenging moments from your deanship?
Sure, thanks. So I loved being dean. It was great. And when I started, people would say, how you doing? I say, I never had a bad day in this job. I stopped saying that after I got a phone call. How many of you in the audience remember Charlie Whitebread? Yeah. Charlie was one of our great teachers. And great here. I was over in the office, and I got a phone call. Bob. Yeah, Charlie. Not going to sugarcoat it. It's cancer. Stage 4. That hit me. And then he said something else that really hit me. For those of you who don't know Charlie, he was a great teacher, but he never came to commencement. He'd go back to his house in Virginia. At the end of the conversation, he said, Bob, make sure you order me some robes this year. And I knew at that point he understood this was his last commencement. I just sort of struggled. How are we going to honor Charlie at this? Charlie shared the news with the students, and my colleague Greg Keating was the vice dean at the time. During his remarks, Greg just casually mentioned Charlie's name, and it was a spontaneous standing 5-minute ovation for Charlie. And I just remember seeing Charlie, there was tears streaming down his eyes. The one thing that, I knew I didn't know how to raise money when I came here. I knew how to be nice to people. What I wasn't really prepared for was losing those you love. Charlie and a whole host of others. And I think, at least for me personally, that was the hardest part of this job.
Yeah.
Saying goodbye to those who meant so much to our community and to me personally.
Thank you for sharing that. Any of the other deans, do you want to speak very briefly to a particular joy or challenge in the job? As Bob did. Yes, Ed.
One thing I want to say, because the clinical education came up, and I don't know how many people know this, but one of the great features of this USC that Dorothy Nelson really created and inspired is we have live action clinics. The stresses of the finances, the expenses of having actual real clients means most law schools have simulated clinics. They're doing computer things, like UCLA does that. But USC has not only do we have real clients, real people in the community, but the USC law students have been important players in the evolution of laws. For example, our students, under the supervision of our wonderful clinical faculty, but our students in the post-conviction justice project got the first battered women's defense accepted in California, so that women who were in prison for having assaulted or killed their abusive husbands, these abusive men, and they snapped and they couldn't take it anymore. It was USC law students who got the California judiciary to accept that defense, and there are people out there on the streets today who should always have been out there on the streets today, but who were not on the streets because of our legal system. And that's just the kind of place that USC is. It's a committed place. It's committed to the world. And that law center notion is not just that a lot of us are overqualified, overeducated, interdisciplinary poobahs, but we're also people who get out there. We talk on TV, we write op-eds, we do blogs, and we're trying to help LA, we're trying to help the world, and that's just very exciting. So I just wanted to note that about our clinical programs in particular.
Thank you. I think it's time to turn it over to Jalen Russell, our Student Bar Association president this year. Thank you so much for your leadership for the school.
Of course. So I have a question for all the deans on the panel. Can you share a story of students who have had a big influence on you or maybe even inspired you personally?
Sure, Judge Nelson.
There were about 20 people in this room I could mention, and that's the fun of teaching. But I have to mention this young lady who was an outstanding student, editor of the Law Review. She became a law clerk of mine. She became dean of Dayton Law School, and bless her little heart, she was one of those law students I look for who are not brilliant in the law, but care about the justice system. And now, having been dean at Dayton twice, dean at Santa Clara, the new provost at Santa Clara, one other, and then I have Scott Bice, who was my associate dean, who I cannot overestimate his integrity, his knowledge, the kind of person that you would trust with your very life. Then, when I became a judge and created the Western Center on Law and Poverty, the president of this right over here, Marv Garrett, a former student. We have Peer Mediation Invitational, where students come and mediate in front of mediation experts. And a former student, Larry Flax, said, got to feed the students. He knew I always believed in feeding people. And
Know where this is going.
through California Pizza, provided pizza and salads for these 300 kids, elementary, junior high, and high school kids who came. And we had some of them experiment with litigating and then mediating. And I'd always say, what worked better? And they yell, mediation. I said, I'm glad you said that, because now you may have California pizza.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do any of the others?
I have a sense that not any particular student, but the student ethos that has been at this school since Dorothy's time, maybe before, but I wasn't here then. There is a sense of community. There is a sense that the students are engaged with each other in a supportive way rather than a competitive way. And they have spent lots of time creating organizations such as the Public Interest Law Foundation that do good work, but that also give them an opportunity to work together in a collegial way. That kind of feeling is fragile. You can lose it unless you keep pushing on it. And I'm always impressed when the second-year students, I hear them giving the orientation to the incoming first-year students. And what they're saying is, now, here's the way USC Law School operates, and here's the ethic that we have, and it's up to you to continue that tradition, and we're going to be watching you. And I think that's a special thing about USC that I've always really appreciate it.
Any of you?
Sure, I'm happy to add. And this is, I guess, as was true of Scott's, a little bit general, though a lot of individual students could fit this description, which is, you know, the law school has something close to 200 employees, something close to 1,200 students, and lots of moving parts. So inevitably, we're doing something wrong. Inevitably, people who don't like the way we're doing something want it addressed. And that's inevitable. But what I find really fantastic, it makes our jobs much easier, but it also makes the system run, is the students' reaction to something they feel isn't working right is never torches and pitchforks. The student reaction is, let's find out who in the institution is the right person to talk to. So sometimes that's me, sometimes it's someone else. And let's go talk to them. And they show up with an explanation of what they're concerned about. If we listen to them, they listen to us when we explain the constraints we face. And I believe without exception, since I've been here, those interactions had led to change on our part, because it turns out it's really easy to change what you're doing when you're not, when they come at you in this collaborative way. And understanding on their part about why things may have gone awry, or why things were the way they were, or why we can't do everything thereafter. And I find the students here to have that very mature, sophisticated understanding that they are not the only that is, the students in front of me at any given moment are not the only participants in the enterprise, and we don't have infinite capacity to do anything. And so I found that our problem solving, which is a lot of this job, is what's wrong and how do we fix it, when it involves the students, is 1,000 times easier than it could be. And again, this is not true of every law school. And something in the water here, when students arrive, they get acclimated to this, and it creates a much healthier interaction between the faculty, the administration, and the students. And I think we are all the better for it.
Thank you. So now it's time for audience questions, and your remarks, Dean Guzman, really relate to this question from John Burgess, an alumnus from 1990. How can the law school promote civil dialogue in a community that is increasingly divided? Would you want to begin by briefly building on your remarks?
Happy to. I think that's a great challenge for law schools and universities right now. I think there's no doubt that society's divided, and I think it's fair to say that the higher education has not been immune from that. But it remains true that we have at our core, and here I mean our law school, but also the university and other, not every other one, but many other institutions like ours, we have at our core the basic idea that it is facts and ideas and argument that matters. At the end of the day, you cannot be judged right or wrong because of your rank in some argument, and you cannot be judged right or wrong because I'm able to insult you in some way. We do not always do that perfectly, but we remain the steadiest place in society where if you have an idea that is contrary to the orthodoxy, that idea will be heard and tested, and if it wins that test, it will be adopted.
Great, thank you. Dean Rasmussen.
Just to emphasize that, if we can't do it, who can? We are lawyers, right? That's what we stand for. We stand for a reasoned argument in principle. And I know it's important to the rest of the law, to the university, but this is our bread and butter, and this is our obligation. And this has to be a burden that we undertake as a community, because it really, in many ways, defines who we are as a profession.
Thank you. Now a question from a current student. Holly, what do you wish someone had told you when you were starting your career? Anyone want to tackle that? Dean Bice?
Don't be surprised that every time someone makes an appointment to come and see you, that it is something other than, gee, I love everything that's going on. I'm really, really a happy camper, and I just wanted to stop by. Doesn't take long to learn that the appointment means, as Andrew was just saying, there's something that's not going right, and I'd like to get something done about it, that's fine. You learn that fairly quickly.
Your Honor, would you want to add anything?
Well, when students would come in, and I must say, when we began to get more women, we began to get more cooperation among students, sharing of notes, study circles, things that you are doing for other people in the class. But I also feel that many, and some of the faculty felt this way, you come to law school to learn law. And my feeling is you come to law school to learn how to bring about justice in society. And those are the people. A woman had 7 children and didn't have any place to take them. Well, she got together, and I remember another student, Jodi Sherlin, they got together, and they created a nursery school on campus. Well, she had a problem. The students helped her, improved the campus. I think the attitude of, I call it knowledge, volition, and action. You have a problem, have the will to do something about it, and bring others to solve the problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Our final question is from an alumnus. I'm not sure the name. President Folt spoke about interdisciplinary education. As one of the recent beneficiaries, a 1979 JD MBA, I'm curious how that came about and how the dual degree programs stand today. Dean Guzman?
I mean, on the last point, we have, I don't know, what do we have? We must have 8 or 9 dual degree programs. The JD MBA is by far the most popular. The other ones don't have much take-up in the sense that in a typical year they have 0, but they're there, and every few years somebody will take that path. And so they're present, and they work very smoothly. You know, another strength of USC is that if you build a program like that, it's not very difficult to maintain or sustain, and it's available to students. For how it came about, I'm going to defer to somebody to my right.
Well, it was a natural outgrowth of the interdisciplinary approach, and students who were drawn to that wanted to get deeper into another allied discipline. And students proposed, let's have a dual degree program in psychology, for example. So a lot of it came out of student demand for a deeper grounding in the disciplines that they were seeing were being talked about in the law school, but they wanted to go further.
Okay. Can I add this? Andrew's not going to like what I'm going to say now. So for all you current students, you don't have to be all in getting a dual degree program. You have a basket, a bucket of hours that you can use across USC. And one thing I encourage all of you, and this is why Andrew doesn't like it, you take your tuition dollars with you when you go, is to take classes across the university with that bucket. You know, you want to be a corporate lawyer, have a class over at Marshall. Then you have coffee with people who want to be CEOs. You know how they think. You want to be in the entertainment industry? I hear there might be a good film school around here somewhere. You know, go take a class over there. Learn a little bit. You know, we do a great thing with you guys in 3 years, but we don't need every single class to be in the law school. Take advantage of the great university that you're a part of.
Thank you. I'll let Dean Guzman conclude, but I did just want to say thank you. As an alum, I feel so blessed to have had these leaders for our institution. It's really amazing, and they made so many sacrifices for us, so let's just thank them.
So just to make sure your hands don't get too much rest, can we give a big round of applause to Lisa for moderating for us? So maybe in an attempt to put a bow around this, you know, it's clear that from the time Dorothy began till now, the world's changed a lot. Law schools have changed a lot. Universities have changed. We've changed a lot. But there's something at the core that's remained the same. And I think that's the thing, or the things, those are the things that have allowed us to thrive, that have allowed us to be successful. You know, we are fundamentally, at the DNA level, a school committed to the interdisciplinary study of law. We believe that examining the legal system and the implications of law through the many different disciplines that exist on a university campus helps us to understand them better, helps us to say smarter things about them, and help us to advocate for smarter policy. We are committed in an unshakable way to the notion that everybody in our community, staff, faculty, students, deserve the support of the institution and the people around them, and deserve the opportunity to be their best selves both here and when they leave here. We are certain that we have to be, and indeed we are, a force for good in our society's constant and imperfect attempt to be ever more pluralistic, ever more diverse, ever more inclusive, and ever more tolerant. And that too is central to us. And lastly, I think one of the things that gets me up in the morning, and I know gets my colleagues up in the morning, is the knowledge that we're doing this really important thing. We're training future generations of lawyers, but that's not actually the entirety of it. Every time in our society, or virtually every time in our society, a really important decision is made. And I mean important on a small scale of a small family business or something like that, or internationally consequential decision. At the table are lawyers, and those lawyers are affecting the decision. So we're not merely training a set of practicing lawyers, which we surely are, but we're training the leaders of tomorrow. And that's a responsibility I know we all take seriously, but more importantly, what an incredible privilege it is for any of us to have the opportunity to, in some minor way, you know, affect the course of the ship that is engaged in that exercise. And so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn if I speak on behalf of all of my fellow deans, that we're so grateful that we had this opportunity. And to the question of students who inspired us, I resisted saying the truth, which is we are constantly inspired by our students in ways that the students never understand, because we see in them the thing they're going to become and the things they're becoming right before our eyes. And that's something I think that we all take to heart and we all appreciate and never really leaves our minds. So thank you to all the students, and thank you also, students past and present, I should add, but thank you also to everyone else. We get to sit up here, but it's all because we have faculty behind us, because we have staff behind us, and because we have students behind us. So thank you to all of you, and thank you all for coming. Thank you to Lisa, and thank you.